You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
New Speaker Chris Welch met the media on Wednesday after former House Speaker, his predecessor, Michael Madigan, was indicted and said it's a new day in Springfield. But former Speaker Welch also oversaw the Special Investigative Committee as the House tried to determine whether or not it would take any steps to officially censure or potentially punish, maybe even expel, former Speaker Madigan.
As the former chair of the Special Investigation Committee, I said all along during the course of that process that I thought that there was a more appropriate forum to deal with the things that we had been hearing in the public domain, and I thought that forum was the United States Attorney's Office. The United States Attorney's Office has all of the resources that it needs to properly and thoroughly investigate allegations of corruption. I knew that all along, and we said that it was proper for United States Attorney John Lausch to be the one to conduct an investigation, not a legislative committee. And what we have learned today was that indeed they did their job, and they have brought an indictment of our former speaker.
But joining us now is a former House Republican, Grant Worley, who also sat on that Special Investigative Committee digging into and investigating that ComEd corruption case. What did you make of that indictment? Was there anything new in it?
There certainly was, and I haven't read all 106 pages, but when I see they're trying to garnish over $2 million, there's clearly some new information in there. 22 counts. It's not like they just reached and got one or two counts. 22 counts is substantial, and I look forward to Speaker Madigan, former Speaker Madigan, having his day in court and explaining these away.
Do you feel in some way relieved that, I know you wanted to see more action from the Special Investigative Committee. You wanted to see that House committee actually take the action before there was an indictment. Do you feel relieved now that the prosecutors have done that? Because I remember when this thing sort of fell apart and then Representative Welch shut it down, there was an open question of whether or not Mike Madigan would ever be indicted.
So that was the question at that point in time. I would be interested now in knowing what the backstory is between then Representative Welch and then Speaker Madigan Welch when the SIC was going on as far as who was protecting whom. I think there are some serious questions that need to be asked of now Speaker Welch. I think Natalie Manley, Representative Manley, needs to be sitting in this chair and answering some questions why her? She was on the SIC,
oh, okay.
and her and Representative Elizabeth Hernandez, they shut that committee down, not without cause. They said that they were concerned that it was going to interfere with the federal investigation. We have written documents, 2 letters from United States Attorney Lausch saying the SIC will not interfere with their with our investigation, and instead they just blindly shut it down and abused their power yet again.
But not before Madigan's reputation took a hit, and not before we learned actual news. That was one of the things about that committee was it's rare that you see seasoned lawyers sit down and actually share new information. We saw that in that committee from ComEd's attorneys saying, oh yeah, no, this appointment, Fidel Marquez to this board seat, they spelled out information that we didn't know that actually teased out exactly how Madigan maneuvered in this building.
Correct, and that's why they shut it down. We had one witness, and that one witness shed new light on Speaker Madigan's operations, and so they did not want any more witnesses coming forward because they didn't want any new information coming out. So of course they shut it down in their own best interest, but not in the interest of this building in these chambers here in the state government. They did what they thought was best for them and not the people of Illinois.
You've stepped away from your seat in the House, but in the years since, Speaker Welch has stepped in. There's still the lingering effect of the pandemic, and there are some Republicans, I think even some Democrats, who have said, we'd like to see some hearings. We'd like to see some people testify. We'd like to see about the pandemic or about a number of other things. And we're not seeing a lot of those. Do you see any connection between Speaker Welch's personal experience in the political risk associated with a hearing and the lack of these hearings now?
Absolutely. If they say sunlight is the best disinfectant, if we're not going to put sunlight on some of the things that go on in the Illinois House, either then or now, that is just a continuation of the way that Speaker Madigan ran things.
No, actually, it's very different. Speaker Madigan would do hearings all the time where he would drag Republicans to death with the witnesses he wanted. You know that well.
If you get me started on committees of the whole, I'm going
to... I think it's actually a marked difference. Speaker Madigan was almost Machiavellian in how well he would use the public platform of a committee hearing to just beat an idea to death to his advantage.
It was orchestrated and very well manipulated.
Yes.
But I don't think, and I have not served under a Speaker Welch, but I don't think that Speaker Welch has the same panache that Speaker Madigan held, and I don't think anybody ever will again.
I asked if you saw anything new in the indictment, and you mentioned, yes, that the indictment itself was obviously new, and the scope of how much wealth the feds think Madigan got through ill-gotten gains was what the prosecutor said. That number was new, but the actions were not. The communication that they had recorded in 2018 where Madigan referenced the future governor, the communication they had in 2017 about the property tax appeals client and the land deal, all of these things were recorded and on federal servers for 2, 3, 4 years. What's new about any of this?
Well, federal investigations clearly take a long time, and then you throw COVID in the mix on top of all of that, and I can understand why the lengthy delay. One of the things that I learned in the brief review of the document of the indictments was the 13th Ward organization. That is the same organization that came into Naperville and worked very hard to get the new rep elected. So when you see how the indictments lead to the business practices of the 13th Ward, I have firsthand knowledge of how that happened and who those players are, and they're the 13th Ward.
But to be clear, there's nothing illegal about a Chicago political operation getting involved in Naperville politics, right? I mean, maybe you'd like to make that illegal, but...
No, but I take it as a badge of honor. He had to send his best crew out in order to silence a very vocal critic.
It opens an interesting point, though. It opens the point that former Speaker Madigan has already articulated through his lawyers. Everything he did was ordinary politics. He didn't cross a line. He didn't break a law. That's what he says. He's like, I'm going to fight this in court and I'm going to win, because he knew right where that law's edge was. He would tiptoe up to it. He would do all the things that everybody, it pretty much admittedly in this building said, that's really shady, that's not ethical, but it's also not criminal.
Well, I think the federal government has a different take on that.
They do now.
They do now.
But they haven't really told us what triggered that, because everything they spelled out in the law, or everything they spelled out in the indictment, I should say, it hints at things, but it doesn't actually give us the smoking gun, does it?
I don't know the answer to that, but when you look at the RICO statute, it's pretty expansive, and I understand the judge that this case is going in front of is a RICO specialist, and so it'll be very interesting to watch over the years how this unfolds and what RICO case can or cannot be made.
Put that on the bottom shelf. What does that actually mean for people watching from home? Okay, that there's this
racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization. RICO.
So, but it extends the statute of limitations so that you can look farther back into the history.
You can look farther back, and the penalties are more severe. That's why somebody at the press conference yesterday asked what's the maximum penalty, and it's under the RICO statute that he could get 20 years, maximum of 20 years.
Could spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Right.
Are Republicans giddy about this moment? Do you feel vindicated? What's the mood among Republicans right now?
Well, I'm down here clearly talking with some of my colleagues, and the mood is finally maybe we can change and make the state a better place.
He was already gone.
He was gone, but now this could, listen, we have a Madigan, a Burke, a Cullerton, and a Daley all under indictment. It's a new day in Illinois. If that doesn't send a chill down people in elected office who are thinking or currently doing things wrong with their office for their personal gain, if that doesn't send a chill down their spines, nothing will.
I've heard someone else say it's a new day in Illinois. Speaker Welch.
I haven't been tuning into him.
No? All right. How have you been spending your time off?
Very happily.
Okay, very interesting. Grant Worley from the Special Investigative Committee, who stepped away just before that veto session would take over, and all of a sudden Speaker Madigan would step down. Did you ever think this day would come when he was indicted? I did.
I knew pretty quickly when I first took office here that sooner or later his actions are going to catch up to him. Whether I was here for it or not, to me it was just a matter of time before the FBI and the IRS caught up with Michael J. Madigan.
Got to ask you, it's an election year. Who do you like for governor?
I think Richard Irvin. Aurora is right next door to Naperville. I have seen the impact that he has had on his community. Aurora used to be a place sort of falling apart and heading in many different directions, and he's cleaned it up. He's put more law enforcement on the streets. He's taken Aurora to the next level, and if he can do that for the state of Illinois, I think we'll all benefit from his...
Violent crime is up in Aurora.
That would be news to me. I know as someone who lives next door in Naperville and we go over to Aurora, it is a much more welcoming, friendly, safe place to go. I would not have said that 10, 15 years ago.
Is he a conservative?
He is to me.
That's an interesting question. A lot of people in the Republican Party right now are having this debate over whether or not there was a strategic decision among some of the establishment to just embrace the person who had access to the biggest pile of money.
So I worked with Mayor Irvin at that point in time when I was on city council in Naperville, and he was trying to do what was best for his constituents. Now, does he meet every box of what a radical right-wing Republican is going to demand? Probably not, but to me that's a positive. He's an individual that has shown at the local level that he can get things done. I think if you can move that up to the state level, he can move Illinois in a positive direction.
What makes a radical right-wing Republican radical?
You'd have to ask one of them.
I mean, that was your term. How do you
Yeah.
define that?
I'd rather not get into that right now because there's people that are running that I don't want to.
Attack?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, it's just not my style anymore.
All right. He's no longer running for office. I thought maybe that would unfetter you.
No, but I'm
to
clearly in the
speak your
urban
mind.
camp. And listen, I'll take it a step farther. When you look at State Representative Avery Bourne, somebody that I've worked with for 6 years, she is an absolute rock star. So when you put her with extremely, what I consider strong conservative credentials with Mayor Richard Irvin, who some may not think is conservative enough, I think that is a dynamic duo that could do wonders for the state of Illinois.
Very interesting. Former House Republican Grant Worley from Naperville, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
We're back in just a moment.